So if you go to Google and say, somebody's sitting there, they're behind on their mortgage, they got pre-foreclosure coming in, they're going to go on Google and type in, I want to sell my house fast. And they hit enter. And then one of our websites will be one of them that come up, and they reach out to us that way.
Are you ready to transform your life? This is a no-nonsense show helping immigrants like you create generational wealth, even while working full-time. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Saket Jain.
Welcome back, Migrate to Wealth listeners. Today I have the pleasure to talk to another immigrant friend of mine. He's a third-generation immigrant, so his migrant genes have been diluted a little bit, but the spirit hasn't died. Nick Sicilian. Nick is a co-founder for REIAF, and what we really wanted to talk today to Nick was he trains and he has a mastermind called REIAF Mastermind, where he basically works with a lot of investors who are trying to also become active within a very specific asset class, which we're going to talk about as well. But it's all real estate related though. The term RE in REIAF is real estate. Nick, welcome to the show, buddy. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you very much for having me, man.
Awesome. Nick, before we go into your story, why don't we open up the show with, when you hear the term migrate to wealth, what does that mean to you?
Moving, right? So moving to wealth, right? Migrate doesn't have to be just somebody moving from country to country, immigration, right? But like I moved out of New York as soon as I graduated. I ran out of New York to Texas just because I saw better opportunities for myself, for my family, for my future family. So moving to wealth is what I think I come up with on that.
Awesome. And then wealth, what does wealth meant to you, and what it mean to you today? Can you help us paint that picture? When you just graduated, you were looking to run out of New York, which is great. You landed in Dallas now, and you've been there for a while. How has what was the initial definition, and has the definition changed?
So that's one of those definitions that I really think everybody has their own, right? My wealth isn't the same as your wealth, as the same as Mark Cuban, right?
Right.
So I think everybody has to figure out what their own wealth is. That's step one, right? Because every time they always compare to somebody else, you're going to be not happy. So figure out what your wealth is. To me, it was family. I wanted to build a house and own a property and have a family and not have all these stresses that I was seeing on Long Island, right? High tax, high everything. So I moved out of there to somewhere that was more friendly for single family homeowners and, first time home buyers and everything, right? The freedoms in Texas compared to New York or the Northeast in general are just, you can't compare. So, so for me, wealth was, a sense of happiness, a sense of security, and nothing more than that, right? I don't need $1 billion and Rolls Royces to be wealthy.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting, Nick, because I always tell people is that at the onset, most of us are happy and secure people. Then we go out in this pursuit of money. I won't even call it wealth, because we think that's going to give us more security and happiness. Then we live then we get there, then we live the remaining of our life worrying about losing all that wealth. So you really never found the security and the happiness that you're looking for. You're just chasing money at that point. So to your point of go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's all right.
I think what I was going to say was to just piggyback off that is when you first asked me, what that was, my answer was going to be bluntly, wealth is happiness, right? Yeah. But to anybody hearing that, they're going to think money is happiness, right? Because they're going to relate money to wealth. But that's not what I meant. I meant literally, to me, wealth is peacefulness. Wealth is happiness. Yeah. Wealth is just stress-free, right? That whatever that is to you, that might be something completely different. But to me, wealth is happiness. And it takes a lot to build and get there.
So, Nick, tell us about your journey into wealth. How did you manifest what you were looking for?
So I originally started out as an offshore engineer. I was born and raised New York, Long Island. I went to SUNY Maritime, went to Merchant Marine Academy. I became an engineer, worked offshore, was on some of the biggest ships in the world. And I did that for a handful of years, and it was getting more and more difficult. All right. So we just talked about everything that I had in my mind of what wealth was, and I wasn't building it. I was working offshore. I was making $200,000 a year. I had the Roth and I had the 401k. So I was building wealth in a sense, but I wasn't happy. So I had a wife, I had children. And when my oldest was about 4 years old, he was nonverbal, and it was just getting very difficult to be away, sometimes up to 10 months of the year. So I walked away. I walked away from everything, everything that I knew, right? My education, all of that I just built and worked toward. I hung it up. I hung my boots up and I cashed out, and I got into the family business, which is real estate. I say the family business because my mom was a real estate agent up in New York. My wife she used to be a real estate agent up in New York. She's now works in a title company. My brother, he's been in real estate for 20 years now. So I had something to go to and try to become an entrepreneur. And
Nicholas,
my dad was an entrepreneur. So.
Got it. No, I love that story, and thank you for sharing that story, because I think each of us will come to a point in our life where we'll have to make that decision, right? Where do you want to continue working for the man or for the woman, doesn't matter, or somebody else, or you want to work or want to create something for yourself because of what's important to you. So how was that decision? Your point, you're saying that your son was nonverbal, 4 years old. You can't really FaceTime and all that stuff. I don't even know how much the technology, depending upon, I don't want to give away your age. Who knows when it was?
No, yeah. Because you're also offshore, so there's no internet connections. If you have internet, it's barely enough to text. So, toward the end, don't get me wrong, toward the end, it was miles better than in the beginning. In the beginning, I would talk to my wife, then fiance, then girlfriend, once every 21 days, right? Like literally. So it got significantly easier and easier and easier. But at the same time, my children don't understand. So it got harder and harder and harder at the same time. You start FaceTiming for Christmas and, and everybody's having fun and everybody's happy and everybody wishes you were there and you're providing for all that. But at the same time, you got to hang up that phone and have a heartbreaking moment, and it sucks. It's tough. So what's the point, right? You're building it all for something else. My story was very different though, right? A lot of people that are in that rat race, they still have the opportunity to get into real estate. And this is why I love real estate. It's because it's so multifaceted, right? There's ways to invest in real estate without having to jump, right? I had to burn the ships. That was just my path, right? Not everybody has to burn the ships to get into real estate and start investing and building wealth, right?
Correct.
You can do it on your evenings and your time off and trade things off. I just didn't have that option.
So that decision, when you made that decision of, I want to leave my W-2 at that point, I want to go into the business, what other options were you looking for? Like, how were you thinking about, or was it only the real estate? Were you comparing multiple options? What was your thought process?
No, I spent months trying to find a landside job. Nothing was comparable, like compensation-wise, right? Mm-hmm. And that's really what the deciding factor was. If I wanted to do this, I would have to build it, right? I would have to jump off and go and work. And the only thing I could trade, right, was my time. So I just put in the time.
Okay, perfect. So now you're at a point where you're picking real estate as the next path. Did you become a realtor? Follow the path of your mom, your wife, and your brother? How did you think about real estate at that?
So originally I jumped into real estate as a loan officer. I got in as a loan originator. I was doing non-QM, non-qualified mortgages. So they're all investment financing, right? So hard money loans, DSCR loans, portfolio loans, commercial loans, right? Anything that is not owner occupied, right? Non-Fannie and Freddie. I jumped into that. And I was drinking from the fire hose.
And wait, sorry to interrupt you. I think before you go too deep, I want to pause there for a second. So for those people who do not understand non-qualified mortgages and Q mortgages, what does that really mean? Are you investing your own money? Are you investing somebody else's money? Are people like who want to invest? Give a little bit more color on that, because it's an important point.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about only single family. All right. So I'm not talking about commercial. So single family residential houses, right? Investors can use non-QM lenders, right? They are typically hard money lenders, right? So if you just go on Google and type in hard money lender, they're called hard money because it's based on a hard asset. Okay. So what the lender is going to come in and do is he's going to come in and say, all right, Mr. Smith, you want to do XYZ to this property and it's worth a certain amount and you're going to increase the value to X, to a further amount. I will lend you a portion of that, right? And proceeds. It's not as difficult, right? Typically, when I say difficult, I mean the underwriting, right? So we're not going in and qualifying the property based on your income, right? And it's not all of the Fannie and Freddie laws because it's an investment loan only. You're not going to live there. So typically these loans are higher interest rate and they're shorter time, right? So they're only for 6 months to a year. Get in and get out loan. But and then there's 30-year products too, right? So if you want to refinance that property, you can also refinance it into a longer term, 30 years fixed rate, typically fixed rate, but they're going to be a higher interest rate. Right now, man, they're almost at 9%. So you're hearing right now that rentals are dead. They're not, right? Rentals are never dead. Buying property and holding them is never a bad idea because the average appreciation is just going up. And you can look back all the way to the 30s and look at it. But what that means is that people can't get into them and out of them without leaving significant cash in them right now. So the average is going to be a more wholesale or flip scenario.
No, I think that makes sense, Nick. So thank you again for that. So you said that, why did you pick becoming a loan officer? Like, how did you even look at that? Because that's not, if you just pick up a real estate, most people don't think about being a lender. They want to come into owning something.
It was just an opportunity that I had. I had an opportunity to get in the door of a startup. They were a new hard money lender in Texas. So I was able to once I got the opportunity, I just grabbed it and ran with it.
Yeah.
And anybody can reach out and that position, a loan originator, anybody can go and get that job almost, right? Because they're not hired, right? You're 100% commission based. So you better be ready to feed yourself, right? It's an eat what you kill job.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Got it. So now you became that and you were drinking from the fire. I'm sure you're learning a lot at that point because you're learning on how people are looking at investment. I'm assuming that's what probably...
Well, I was looking the way that investment should be looked at, right? Like I was looking at them through the eyes of the lender, which means that they were always more safer, right? They're always hedged. Yeah. The lender's always in a favorable position. Banks usually rarely fail. With that being said, though, when you're from that higher up, right, you're servicing so many people and you're analyzing. I was analyzing maybe 10 deals a day, right? Just getting on the phone and going over rehabs and going over purchase prices and contracts and everything, going through title work, right? As a lender, you're in the sort of hand by hand, well, you should be hand in hand with the title company, right? Throughout the whole process. If there's any issues, keeping your client up to date on everything, right? The status of a file. So when you go from turning wrenches on an oil rig to writing loans in real estate investing, you're going to learn a lot, right? Because again, you're learning from the fire, you're drinking from the fire hose, right? So you are getting an education.
Love that. So,
and then at the same time, I had my brother as an investor. So we were buying and selling the entire time. And then just recently, last January, I actually finally dipped out and hung up the lender chute officially.
Oh, that's interesting. So let's talk about that for a second. So you became an originator, loan originator, or loan officer, I should say. From there, along that side, you partnered with your brother, and you guys were then investing in single families?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. And was he in New York at that point, or did he had already moved to Dallas?
No. He's been down here. So I still have one brother up north, but he's got a pension job, so he's waiting. He won't leave. I keep on trying to get him to come, but there's 4 of us in Texas. Sorry, 3 of us in Texas, 1 in Florida now, and then 1 in New York.
Awesome. So, you started investing with your brother, who was a realtor. You said for 20 years. That's a person. That's a
Just an investor.
Just an
investor, not a realtor. Yep.
So then, when you guys picked to start to invest, why did you pick single families? Why not multifamilies? Why not commercial? What made you pick that class? Just because you were a loan originator for that asset class, or something different?
It's what our avatar was, right? It's what our whole business was set up for. Commercial is a whole nother game.
Yeah.
When you get into commercial, you end up just becoming somebody that's raising capital in a sense, right? Like, and I don't know, we were very good with the direct to owner, right? Our entire system was set up on PPC and mailers and stuff like that. So in order to make that jump, I felt like it would have been a whole revamping of the company. And then on the side, and at the same time, just didn't like the way rates were going, right? You're buying things and again, I don't want to get into cap rates and all that, but things were just getting tight. And if you're looking at lending as rates are going up, just don't like the way everything was looking. Single families way safer in my eyes, especially in North Tech, right?
I love Dallas area, man. Dallas is a beautiful area. We were actually very close to moving there before we moved from Washington, D.C. to Raleigh. We checked out the schools and everything, but unfortunately, it didn't work out for a variety of reasons. Nick, you mentioned a few terms. I want to make sure our listener base is able to grasp them. You mentioned direct to owner. You mentioned PPC. You mentioned a lot of different terms. Could we break it down so that people can understand what those mean and really where your business model is, so that if somebody wants to learn more about it, they can make sense out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So real estate investing, right? You're going and you're finding people with pain, right? These are people with distressed properties. These are people that were just in probate, so somebody died, or it's a divorce, or taxes are past due, right? So there's some pain point, right? There's some issue. And then you can either do one of two things, right? So you can either reach out to them, or they can reach out to you.
Yeah.
So it's outbound and inbound, right? So you can, if you're looking to get into real estate, right? And if you go on YouTube and type in how to be a wholesaler, anybody on there, right, is going to tell you to go pull a list of free foreclosures or somebody, and then just go door knocking and start cold calling, or just reaching out and just barraging these people. Well, the issue is that you better have the skills to actually help them and close on them, right? So outbound reach is, I don't want to say, it's just more difficult, right? It's a colder lead. So what we prefer is the inbound lead, okay? And how do we get that? Is we just do a lot of marketing, all right? So PPC is pay-per-click. It's, let's just say Google, right? So if you go to Google and say, somebody's sitting there, they're behind on their mortgage, they got pre-foreclosure coming in, they're going to go on Google and type in, I want to sell my house fast. And they hit enter. And then one of our websites will be one of them that come up, and they reach out to us that way. It sounds really easy, but you're trading off work for money, right? So where the other way is very cost efficient, right? It doesn't take much to pick up and make 100 calls a day. It doesn't cost you anything,
right?
But you're probably not going to be as successful because they're colder. So what we do is very costly, but my team, we have 3 people on acquisitions, 3 people on dispositions. That's buying and selling, right? So we have 3 people on buying houses, and then 3 people constantly selling houses. So I know my team, if the phones ring, they're going to be able to help people and get the deals closed. So that's the route we go.
And Nick, I think you said something very interesting there, and we'll talk a little bit more about your business model as well. I think one thing you're basically saying is that, look, when I'm reaching out to Nick, who may be troubled or not troubled, I have no idea, because I'm just hoping that my conversation with Nick is going to go well, and they'll convert. But if Nick is actually reaching out to me directly, saying, hey, Saket, I saw your ad. I actually want to explore this conversation. I'm looking to sell my house fast. Like, it's a very different conversation where I'm trying to convince that I'm the right person to you versus you reaching out to me. In your mind, you've already made that mental leap. And now you may be calling 5 sockets, that's fine, but you're ready to call somebody, which is very important.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's an important point of somebody reaching having an inbound call versus an outbound call. An outbound call, you don't know when you found somebody, what state of mind they're in. Are they ready, willing, and able to make that move fast as you want? So in your case, I love that model, the PPC model. It works fantastic, but it's not, as you said, it's not an easy model. Just because Google for AdWord doesn't mean you have the right keywords. You have to do a lot of legwork on that as well.
You know how many people call us and like, oh, we spent $20,000 and we didn't get a single call or a single lead, and I'm like, I know, right? Like, it's a very costly thing, and if you're getting into it, it's even harder because the way that PPC works and good old algorithms and all that trash, time matters, right? So our account is very aged, right? We have so much time on it that I don't have to spend the same as you, right?
Correct.
So one of the things with PPC is if you start small, but never turn it off, because once it's off, once you shut it off, you're going to have to start all back over, right? You're going to have every time.
So Nick, now,
so keep that in mind. It's a lot of campaigns that you're doing like that. Don't shut them down, tweak them, right? Go in, if you're doing a mail campaign or a phone campaign or whatever, right? Don't just say, all right, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore because it was a failure, right? Go back and take notes and say, all right, well, this I could have done a little bit different, or this I could have made these changes. Let's try this, right? We split test nonstop. And what I mean by split test is like, we'll have funnels that'll be the same exact thing, but just a little bit different, maybe fonts different or anything, and just see what happens, right? And use a different title.
I think we're going to very interesting, because we're not talking about marketing, right? At the core essence of your model, which you already started with, is really about a marketing game, right? Because the better the more inbound leads you have, the more conversion is going to be, period. So the goal in your case is to attract as many inbound calls as you can. So which essentially means is that the ad has to resonate with the right avatar. You have to know who your avatar is, which for those who are new to marketing, all it means is who's your target audience, right? Are you targeting people in the probates? Are you targeting people in foreclosures? Who are you targeting? Then you have to start Can you help us understand that, Nick, at a very, very, maybe 50,000 feet level? What does that mean, and how should people start thinking? Because not everyone may want to become a wholesaler or problem solver, but marketing is a skill I think you can use in any domain you want, any business you want. Even in your work, you're probably marketing at some extent. So to tailor your messaging and wear that marketer hat. And coming from an engineer, as I'm an engineer, we're not trained to think creative in the marketing terms. We're thinking zeros and ones, right? We're not trained to think about how people are thinking. So it'll be a very interesting conversation. So if you can go deeper into that, that'd be great.
I don't do any of the copy. Well, let me just tell you that right now, because I can't. The engineer brain in me, it just can't, right? I very, very 500 meters. This is what it should ABC, and then I give it off to the team. And so I do, I'm big into flow charts, right? So when you're talking about the engineering side, right? How can an engineer mind be in real estate? Get a whiteboard and just start writing everything out on it, right? What you want it to look like, all right? So if I have an inbound call, what's the next step? Oh, they told me they're not ready to sell right now. All right, well, what happens to that phone number? All right, well, it goes in this system, this pile for 3 days, and then somebody calls back and just checks in, and then it goes in for another, right? And then you have a systematic approach to everything. So no, I completely understand the ones and zeros, what you're talking about. To go back on your question, you were talking, I apologize.
Talking about the approach to market. How can an engineer train themselves to think like a marketer? You don't necessarily have to write your own copy, but you have to think like a marketer.
All right. So the thing that everybody has to understand is, right, you have the funnel, right? We're just talking about that.
The funnel as well, Nick. Let's break it down. So I think this is turning into a very different podcast than I had imagined, which is great, which is what I love about this show.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a funnel.
So the funnel is literally, just think of it as a funnel. All right. You want your avatars to discover you and fall into your funnel and then trickle down. You're going to lose some, but you want them to trickle down. And as they get down, they're closer to making a decision, right? That's the final thing. You want them to make a decision. If that decision is to use you as a roofing company, if that decision is to use you as an IT company, whatever that decision, everybody should have a funnel, okay? Yeah. We were talking about marketing before, and, I talk all the time, and people are like, oh, well, that means that if in order to have a funnel and marketing, I have to have this big operation, and you don't. Okay. The first part of a funnel is awareness, right? You want to just tell them who you are, introduce yourself, right? The second part of a funnel is help me out here.
Consideration. Consideration, right?
Yeah, consideration. Yeah. So you're gonna talk to them, right? And then it goes to engagement, and then decision, right? So there's 4s and 5s, all these, right? So you're trying to walk them down. Let's say I'm just a door knock, right? That works pre-foreclosure lists. What that means, pre-foreclosure, these are all public data lists, okay? All this that we're talking about now is all public data. So you can type in Dallas County pre-foreclosure, hit county clerk, and then hit enter into Google, and you'll find Dallas County clerk's pre-foreclosure lists and all of them that are coming up for auction. And then you can take that and then use that to go further, right, and go use, right? So all this information is out there, what I'm getting, right? So let's say you go and door knock. Just door knocking can be your funnel, right? You're going to introduce yourself. You're going to explain how you can help them. You're going to talk about the processes of pre-foreclosure and how they can get out of it and their options, right? And you're going to sit there and walk them down this funnel, but it's not through a website. It's not through PPC or Google. It's literally belly to belly, and you're introducing yourself, and you're telling them how you're going to help them, and you're going to eventually help them make a decision, right? So when I talk about marketing, people always think that it has to go big and get systems and be very costly. Just you have to first look at it and know what you want and what your goals are, right? Build the avatar, understand how you're going to help them. All of those things. The rest of it is just scaling, right? But if you don't have a good foundation, you're just going to scale chaos, and that's going to be miserable.
Yeah, I think that's really where the left brain can help, right? Because the left brain could put some structure into the place. A lot of our audience is engineer. They are left brain. They are thinkers. They are investors. They're very comfortable with spreadsheets, zeros and ones, but they're not necessarily comfortable with copywriting. Not everyone is, to your point, but you don't have to be. Like, as you said, that you don't want to write the copy because you're not good at it, but that doesn't mean you can't learn to think like a marketer. That's what we were talking about here, is that think like a marketer, build your funnel. And if you think about this funnel concept, you can actually take it to any aspect of your life, because you are building funnels. When you're going out and for your business meetings, even if you're a corporate guy or gal, you're using these same techniques and terminologies. You're just doing it more unconsciously. Now you're bringing more consciousness into it, right? So I love that. Now, so Nick, when Saket's now reaching out to you, I have a problem, and you're able to acquire my property, do you just turn around and sell it? Because you said you have 3 acquisition team members, you have a few disposition. What happens in between?
So we have multiple. Our whole thing that we preach, right, is that acquisition comes first, right? You have to, I want to say, purchase a property at the right price. If you buy a property at the right price, you can do anything with it. What that means is we do everything. We'll do fix and flips. So we're actively doing rehabs. I'm not refinancing anything nowadays because we already talked about rates. It just doesn't make sense for me. We're doing a lot of note deals and creative finance deals. We are wholesaling some properties, but not everything is going into a wholesale category. We do a lot of hotels, which is just minor improvements. So buying it, we're closing on it, cleaning it out, doing minor fixes. We're still leaving some sweat equity, is what we like to call it, right? That giving the husband a honey-do list isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
I don't have to break the market every time, and I don't have to push comps every time. I can buy a property at a reasonable price, do reasonable amount of work to it, and sell it for a reasonable amount of money and make a reasonable amount of profit, right? I don't have to push the numbers on everything. So
Yeah.
that was a huge realization too. For the past however many years, everything has just been slamming on this roller coaster upwards, right? And everybody's pushing comps and doing everything they can. And faster turnaround was a way better idea, guys. So that's where we pulled back on. We pulled back on a lot of high-end rehabs. We were doing $1 million flips, and the market's still there for them just because so many people are moving out of California and New York, and they're finding these great deals in Texas. So the market's still there for them, but the length of rehab time is what I didn't like. I don't want to have my neck in that situation for so long. So we're pulling out of that, and we're just doing more faster.
I think let's talk about the intuition behind it, right? So what we're saying is that given the time we're in right now, you can make a reasonable amount of prediction for a week, for a month, maybe. But if you start going 5 to 6 months out, which is where the major rehabs are going to take, these luxury rehabs may take more time because the amount of work, the quality of the work, and the quality of the material is going to be at a different capacity. Right? So I think what you're basically saying is that your intuition behind that is, how can I do a faster turnaround so I can reduce my risk, right? Because you can make some reasonable amount of prediction because of what's going to happen in the market. So I love that, Nick. Now, if somebody's trying to go ahead.
For that, right, all I had to do was change my avatar, right? To go back on the first one, if I want to change my exposure, right, I just changed my avatar and I stopped marketing to those people, right? And we pulled back on that end. So once you break down, it's very easy. You can just, slightly turn off this faucet and trickle more onto here and see what works and what doesn't. So that's what I love about marketing.
Which is another key pointer, as we were saying, is that people are going to say that, well, I can't just pick one avatar. I wanted to attack everything. I think which is what the key essence of your conversation there was really, you can always change your avatar. But if you're not going to pick one, you're never going to start, because there's so many different possible combinations of the avatars. What Nick is probably, and Nick, I'm putting words in your mouth, is you have to identify at least one and go after that person. Now, they may not end up being your final avatar. You may pivot from that, but you'll get started. Starting is the toughest thing to do in this business, because you can go into the mode of, well, I need to have everything perfect. So any thoughts on that, Nick?
No, man, we overcomplicate the shit out of things. That's just as humans, right? Tommy and I, my other brain inside, we always sit there and I'll ping something off him and be like, hey, I'm thinking about this, X, Y, Z. And after I get done ranting, he just looks at me. I'm like, I'm overcomplicating. He's like, yes. All right, never mind. And I won't. Honestly, so often we listen, we don't know what we don't know. And the only way to find out is by committing and taking that first step. It's that easy, right? What does that mean? If you're in a 9 to 5 right now, when you get off of work, go home and maybe look up what open houses are coming this week, right? Start going to open houses, walking properties, right? Start looking at if you can stop and go into an open house and just look at a property, just start understanding what they look like, what the trim looks like, get an eye for them, right? Look at different rehabs, right? Just start doing something. I don't care what it is, just start doing something. Pick up a phone and start making cold calls, right? You're going to get told to F off quite a lot. Right. There's a lot of scripts on for free out there. Hit me up, I'll give them to you. But just making that first step, you're never going to do anything until you make that first step. You have to commit.
Yeah, Nick, so dude, there's so many things I can continue asking. I think we'll probably have to do a deeper dive webinar with you on how to break into this model. Now, one question before we shift gears is going to be more around, if somebody wants to do this, can it be done in any market right now? How do they, because I think that's the biggest fear, right? Because the noise in the world, and it is really a noise, is that real estate's crashing, don't invest. We're back in like 2007, 2008 timeframe where doomsday scenario, and it may happen, may not happen, but there's always ways to make money, right? So when you are when you are telling your mastermind folks or anyone else who's coming to you, what's your recommendation of how to look at the business model that you describe and implement in any market? Can they implement it in any market, or is there a way to pick a market?
You can do this in any market, right? You can go find a distressed property, buy it at a discount, and try to make a profit on it. You can do that anywhere. Your success is going to be drastically different, okay? The numbers that you have to buy at are going to be also drastically different, okay? But that comes in with step 2, right? Step 1 is committing. Step 2 is you have to know what your avatar is and your market, right? Like that's part of figuring out everything, right? So that's with the education portion, right? Like that's with the going around and driving and looking at houses, right? So you'll get a feel of what's possible and what's not possible. I know in Texas, and I'm only talking about Texas, right? I still have investors and friends that are absolutely killing it and crushing it in California, right? But there's a mass exodus out of California right now.
Right.
So would I start investing in California? No. But that doesn't mean that if you're in your early 20s that you shouldn't start, and you're in California that you shouldn't start. You should absolutely start. If that's your market, absolutely start. So it's just, you might have to work a little bit harder, right? You might have to buy at different numbers.
Love that, Nick. So, thank you again for that, man. And I think, of course, this conversation is just a starter conversation, right? We don't expect everyone to learn everything about the business just in this conversation. It's really to give a framework, a starting point, and there's going to be more detail. We'll talk about your contact information if people want to learn more, and by your mastermind as well. Nick, shifting gears a little bit, we're coming towards the end of our podcast right now. I can't believe we've almost talked 40 minutes. It's really around, there is a 20-year-old Nick somewhere out in the world listening to this podcast. But if you were to reflect back and give them one insight that can make their migration into life easier or more thoughtful, what would that be?
So so first off, there's a book that I wish I read way earlier. Okay, and it's a simple book. It's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Sorry, but that's the book, right? The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. It's a very basic psychology book, but it goes into so much detail of what people run into today, right? There's an inner monologue in all of us that constantly stops us, right? Or drives us in the wrong direction, right? So I was having a lot of emotional issues, flaring up, angry, just couldn't, I don't want to say I couldn't control my issues, but I was an engineer offshore, right? Yep. If something didn't go right, you threw a wrench at it, right? And so I was built differently. When you get into this, right, and you're totally different. It's a lot more delicate. So I wish I read that book in my 20s, not in my later 30s, to know that, listen, that inner monologue, that inner voice, it's normal. It's the same thing that's questioning you, right? I still have that imposter syndrome. For me, it manifests in dreams. I will say at least once a week, I wake up in a cold sweat because I was offshore working and I didn't have an engineer's license anymore. I let it lapse, and the Coast Guard was coming on for an inspection, and I was all panicky, right? Like that whole, did I make the right decision, right? This has been years after I've stopped doing that. I'm successful in it, but I'm still having those nightmares. So it never stops, right? It's okay. Just keep going. Okay. That's the only thing that can stop you is yourself. You have to keep going, right? No matter what that means. If you're going to get set back plenty of times in life, just keep going. Pick up, get up.
I love that. That's a new mantra, man. Just keep going. It's actually a good one. You can see that this, again, in any facets of life, this is a helpful way of looking at that challenge. Because challenges are going to come. They're not going to
it sucks, man. It sucks. When our first real estate investment deal that Tony and I did, it was miserable. The rehab went more than double over. We had to replumb the house 3 times. The City of Farmers branch, never work with the City of Farmers branch. They are horrible. But the only way through it was to just keep going, right? If I can't just walk away and no, the only way is to keep on putting money into this house and get it listed and get it off, right? I think we made $5,000. That's just because the market saved us. But the only way to get through it is just forward, right? Make minor adjustments along the way. Hindsight is always 20/20. So learn, only make one mistake once. Never make a mistake twice. It's simple things, but it hurts. Learn.
Nick, well, thank you for sharing that story, man. Nick, a little bit more philosophical question right now, because you interact with a lot of investors, you interact with a lot of different people coming from different aspects of life. As you reflect back on your interactions with each individual that you have done, if you can abstract it, where do you feel humanity as a whole could migrate towards for greatness in the next few decades?
Talk about a deep one on me. I don't know. I think everybody just needs to come together. I hate social media, but I use it every day and every hour just for business, right? It feeds so many mouths, right? There's so many ways to use it for business, right? A simple selfie and providing help to somebody is a tremendous way to be useful on social media, right? It's a simple thing, but it can go so far, and it's free. That's the best part about it. But at the same time, I really strongly believe that it's driving us away from everybody, and we're really just that whole thing. I think we need to come together and I can relax and just realize that not everybody is the devil that everybody portrays them. It's just everybody's looking at things through a screen, and it's not that way. They just got to look outside and say the world's not falling apart. Like it is in some places, but it's always been in some places, right? It's just calm down and take one day at a time. Don't try to affect anything outside of your bubble, right? Don't let anything outside of your bubble affect you. So,
love that, Nick. Thank you again for sharing that, man. It always gives you. I love this. This is my favorite question usually because it gives so much insight into somebody, how people think, because everyone's a human being, and everyone has a perspective to that. It's helpful. So thank you for sharing that, Nick. Towards the end, man, I love this conversation, and I know you've added a lot of value to me and to the listeners as well. But I'm pretty sure there's a lot more where this came from. If somebody wants to get in touch with you and they want to go deeper into the concepts we talked about, where can they learn more about you? How can they get in touch with you? All of that good stuff.
So we're on YouTube. We have our websites. We have all the social media. So I go by The Sicilian Brothers, right? It's me and Tony. So if you go to thesicilianbrothers.com or our mastermind, REIAF.com, you will find all of our links there. We're on Instagram. Our YouTube just broke 85,000 subscribers. So I'm kind of really happy about that. So, man, it's part of just keep going, right? That whole one step in front of the other. So it pays off in the long haul.
Perfect, man. Nick, thank you again for an exciting conversation, buddy. I will make sure all the links are included in the show notes for the listeners. I'm pretty sure this is not the last time we're speaking, Nick. You're going to be back soon. For all the listeners,
I appreciate it.
Thank you again for tuning in. Without you, the show is not going to be possible. If you're listening to this part, that means something in this conversation really stuck by you. I would love to know what kept you going to listen to this podcast. If you could drop us a comment in the YouTube or DM me on any of the social media platforms, I would love to hear from you. Thank you again, Nick, and thank you again, the listeners. Until next time, see you later. Hold on one second.
If you got value from this episode, you might consider sharing this content with a friend. But most importantly, be sure to take action on what you've learned. One way you can take the next step is to connect directly with Socket on an investor call. That link is waiting for you in the show notes below.